They cut me out of the inheritance, so I added a beneficiary who turned their faces white. The lawyer read like a man reading a weather report. His voice was soft, but the room felt loud. I sat on a wooden chair that bit into my legs. My cousins shuffled papers. My hands were cold. When he said, "To Lena Grace Cole," my chest rose with hope. Then the paper cracked under his thumb. He paused. He looked down like he had lost a page. "Removed at the family's request," he read, and the words landed on me like stones. There was a sound like someone dropping a tray. My Aunt Marjorie smiled too wide. My cousins whispered and clinked champagne. I had carried Grandma's grocery bags. I had scrubbed her pans. I had held her hand when she said my name in the night. My name in the will was a small, bright thing inside me. Now it was gone. I felt my heart break in one clean crack. Air left my lungs. I tried to catch it to make a sound, but my voice turned to glass. My cheeks burned with a shame that was not mine. I watched Marjorie's face. She sat straight like a queen at a table. Her elbow rested on the arm of her chair as if the world belonged to her. The lawyer looked at me with the pity of someone who had read the end of the story already. "Hit subscribe for more true revenge stories," a strange voice in my head said, like an echo from another life. I needed to go, but my legs felt glued to the floor. I left the room with my head down, and the house felt too small. Outside, the sky was thin and mean. I held my bag like a shield and walked to the car, wanting to cry and not knowing why. As I started the engine, a folded paper tucked under the windshield wiper caught my eye. Had my name on it. I opened the paper with the trembling fingers I had used to lace Grandma's shoes. The note was short, in a handwriting I loved. "For when they show their true faces," it read. My stomach dropped. I thought of the will room, of faces smiling like doors opening at a hotel. I thought of the moment when the lawyer said I was removed. My eyes blurred. I kept the note in my jacket like a small lantern. That night, at my cousin Brad's party, laughter rolled like drums. I had fed Grandma her soup while the house smelled of roses. I had been there for every small thing. Yet in that room they told a story that cut me out to make room for themselves. I sat on the edge of a sofa and listened while Brad showed off a new car photo. "Grandma was a saint," he said, clinking his glass. "We're lucky." Cousins circled like birds. Marjorie came near with her perfume and a smile that hid teeth. "Guess hard work pays off, dear," she said to me. Her voice was silk and knife at the same time. I forced a smile and felt my muscles fail. Inside, anger flared like a match. I had not slept well for months taking care of Grandma. I had changed diapers, fixed loose buttons, and sat awake when she could not sleep. How dare they call me theft? When the laughter rose again, I left. In the alley, I pressed the note to my chest. The paper smelled faintly of lavender and old books. I knew then that something had been done to take my name away. I kept thinking the word "why" until it blurred. I thought about the lawyer's pause. Someone had asked to remove me. Someone had shaped the end of my life without asking me. My hands closed around the steering wheel and I decided I would not break. Not yet. I had to find out who had moved the pieces on the board. Grandma's house smelled like lemons and old quilts. I had given her my Saturdays so she would not be alone. I had listened to her tell the same stories while I polished her silver. My visits were small rituals. I fed her toast, smoothed her blankets, and read words until her eyes grew heavy. She called me my girl, and I kept that name like a badge. I had promised her once, in a whisper, that I would always be there. The memory came back like a bright small bird. I sat in my kitchen and held a mug too hot for my hands. I closed my eyes and saw her smile when I braided her hair. I saw the little list on the fridge of all the pills and times to take them. I saw her handwriting on faded envelopes. I had kept every promise in a life that had given me little else. When the will was read, part of me ripped away. The loss was not only the house or the money. It was the idea that goodness mattered. I walked to the shelf where her photograph stood. She wore a blue dress and a hat with a feather. Her eyes seemed to ask me to remember. I kept every promise, I whispered to the glass. My throat tightened. I thought of Marjorie's smile that would not fade. I thought of Brad's laugh. My mind ran like a small, anxious animal looking for a door. I decided to do what I had always known how to do. Look closer. I opened a drawer and pulled out a ledger of small notes I had kept when Grandma trusted me with bills and little lists. There, tucked between receipts, I found a stamped envelope with my name. It was old and smelled like dust and secrets. My fingers shook as I slid the paper free. Inside was a key and a short line in my grandmother's hand. For when they show their true faces. I pressed the key to my chest and felt the world tilt. I had been given a piece of the house that no amount of money could buy. A clue. The key left a cold dent in my palm. I walked to Grandma's cottage with the sun thin and pale. The place was quiet like a book after the story ended. I found the tiny attic door behind a shelf of old hats. The lock was small, brass and patient. My hands had worked with wood all my life in little ways. Fixing hinges, mending a chair. So I fitted the key like a practiced hand. It turned with a soft click that sounded like a promise. Inside the chest, dust moved like a slow cloud. Old ledgers lay stacked carefully. Deeds, yellowed and soft, breathed out the smell of time. I ran my fingers over pages with names and numbers that meant more than numbers. There was a thin folder without a stamp. My heart beat fast. When I opened it, I saw a paper that made my breath stop. An unsigned amendment to the will. The lines where a signature was meant to be were empty, but the handwriting was clearly Grandma's. She had written words that could have given me half the estate. I thought of the lawyer's pause at the reading. I thought of Marjorie's bright smile. Someone had stopped Grandma from signing. Someone had removed me while she was still alive. Rage rose, but it was small and precise, the kind that makes a person steady. I slipped the amendment into my bag and closed the chest. As I left the attic, a voice behind me said, "You shouldn't be up here." The voice was low and known. I turned and saw the nurse who had helped Grandma. Her face looked tired and odd with fear. She reached for my hand and said, "You must listen." They made her sign things when she could not know. My mouth went dry. Proof was near if I could hold on to it. The nurse's words landed like rain. I sat on the cottage steps while she told me the small, terrible story. She said that when Grandma was weak, Marjorie had come and stayed longer. She had kept the pills near and the papers closer. The nurse's hands trembled when she spoke. She told me how Marjorie would insist on holding Grandma's hand while a pen hovered above a paper. I leaned in and felt the cold truth. Someone had used Grandma's weakness to move papers. After she left, I called the family lawyer and asked nothing in words but everything in tone. Michael, the lawyer, spoke carefully. He said, "If the amendment had been signed, Lena, it would have made a clear change." I asked him to come to the cottage. He agreed to look over what I found. While I waited, I grew small with fear that evidence could slip like water through fingers. But fear can sharpen a mind. I thought of the ledger, the key, the unsigned amendment. I thought of the folded note under my car wiper. That night I sat awake making a list. Names, dates, small facts that might be proof. The nurse could testify. Brad's car was newer than last year. Marjorie had been close to Grandma in the last months. I wrote everything in simple, steady lines. When Michael arrived, he did not smile. He laid the papers on his desk and touched the amendment like a man touching a jewel. He said, "This could change everything, but you must be careful. If they see a threat, they will move faster." I felt a cold hand of worry. I had thought I only wanted what my grandmother intended. Now I realized that asking for truth would start a war. Michael's phone buzzed then. He looked at the screen and his face changed. "They're planning a toast for this Friday," he said, voice low. "They don't know you found anything yet." I walked into brunch with my cousins like a shadow wearing a smile. They sat at a long table filled with fruit bowls and glasses of orange juice. Brad waved his keys in the air like a flag. "Check out my new baby," he said, pointing to a photo of a shiny red sports car. The table cheered. My stomach tightened. They were celebrating with money that was supposed to be shared. Money Grandma had spoken of with pride and care. I slid into a seat at the corner, the unsigned amendment resting in my bag like a secret heartbeat. Brad leaned over and whispered, "Guess all that time you spent playing nurse didn't pay off, huh?" His grin was sharp. I forced my lips to lift, but my jaw felt stiff. The noise around me blurred. I watched their happy faces and wondered how long they had planned this. Had Grandma known? Had she tried to warn me with that key? I picked at a muffin and listened. Marjorie bragged about new tiles for her kitchen. Another cousin talked about booking a week in the mountains. They passed around their phones with screens showing orders, purchases, plans. I kept hearing the nurse's voice saying, "They made her sign things when she could not know." When the bill arrived, Brad tapped it proudly. All on Grandma's legacy. The air turned heavy. I excused myself, my heart pounding. Outside, I leaned on a brick wall and breathed. I had cried enough. I had waited enough. Something inside me hardened, not cruel but clear. If they wanted to play dirty, I would learn the game. I opened my notes app and typed 2 words. Find proof. Michael invited me to his office the next morning. His place smelled like ink and old folders. I sat across from him while he laid the amendment on the table. "This is her writing," he said, using a calm voice that made me nervous. "But because it's unsigned, it can only help if we show she tried to change the will and was prevented." I felt heat rush to my face. "Prevented by who?" "You know the answer," he said softly. "But knowing and proving are different." He leaned back and folded his hands. "Your grandmother trusted you," he said. "She told me once that you were the only one who visited without asking for anything." My throat tightened. Those words felt like a gift and a wound. He looked toward the window. "If this amendment had been signed, you would have owned half the estate." "Half, Lena." The room seemed to tilt. That meant Grandma had wanted me safe, wanted me supported, wanted me seen. "Then they stopped her," I whispered. Michael did not nod, but his silence answered. He pulled out a thick folder. "These are statements from the last weeks of her life. Some signatures look strange. Cheeky. Not like earlier years. Can we use them?" "Yes. Only if someone speaks," he said. "Someone who was there." My mind flashed to the nurse. The fear in her eyes. Her hand gripping mine. "She said things," I told him. "She saw things." "Then get her statement," Michael said. "And be quick. Your aunt is already talking about sealing files." When I left the office, my hands shook. But under the fear sat something stronger. Purpose. I met the nurse at a small cafe near the hospital. She wore pale blue scrubs and kept checking the door. When she saw me, she exhaled like she had been holding her breath for years. We sat in a booth tucked into a corner. Steam rose from her tea. My hands pressed flat on the table. "You were right to call me," she said softly. "I should have spoken earlier." She told the story slowly, like peeling tape from skin. She said that during Grandma's last weeks, Marjorie had come often, too often. She brought papers and whispered instructions. She told the nurse to step out for privacy, even when Grandma looked confused. Once, she found Grandma crying because she didn't understand what she had just signed. My chest hurt hearing that. Grandma, strong and gentle, pushed by hands she trusted. The nurse pulled out her phone. "I recorded one conversation," she said. "I didn't know what to do with it then. But maybe it can help now." She pressed play. Marjorie's voice came through, sharp and cold. "Just sign, Mother. It's for the good of the family." My breath caught. "Will you make an official statement?" "Yes." She nodded, eyes wet. I couldn't live with myself if I stayed quiet. When she left, I sat alone in the booth, the audio replaying in my head. Grandma had tried to fix the will. She had tried to protect me. And they had rushed to silence her. I wiped my eyes and paid the bill. As I walked outside, the wind hit my face. Felt like a push forward. I texted Michael. "We have proof." I spent the next days digging into records. My laptop became my map, leading me through old deeds and hidden corners of Grandma's financial world. I sat in my small apartment with papers spread like puzzle pieces. That's when I found it. A trust in my name, untouched, buried deep among Grandma's investments. Its balance made my heart jump. It wasn't huge, but it was strong enough to stand. Enough to start something new. Enough to move without them knowing. The trust papers showed Grandma had set it up when I was 13. Little nest. Small shield. I remembered her hugging me after a school project and saying, "Some things grow slow but steady." Maybe she meant this. Check dates. The trust had never been touched by my aunt or uncle. They probably didn't even know it existed. And I was the only living co-signer. That meant it was mine. Fully mine. For the first time since the will reading, I felt like the ground stopped shaking. That night I went to a family dinner. I watched Marjorie brag about a new holiday house by the lake. She talked loudly like she wanted the world to bow. Brad laughed too hard at every joke. Meanwhile, I sipped water and kept quiet. At one point I said, "I'm meeting a lawyer too." The table fell silent for a second. Marjorie's fork paused midair. Brad's smile flickered. "What for?" Marjorie asked. "Oh," I said lightly. "Just future plans." Their eyes followed me the rest of the night. When I got home, I opened my laptop and stared at the trust papers again. The numbers weren't small. They carried possibilities. My heart thumped steady. They took everything Grandma meant for me. They had grabbed the estate like hands grabbing candy. But they didn't know I had my own peace now. My own starting point. I breathed deep and closed the files. The trust wasn't just money. It was a spark. A way to move that didn't involve begging for scraps from the people who had cut me out. It gave me the freedom to choose what revenge should look like. Not loud anger, but something cleaner. I wrote a sentence in my notebook. They wanted it all? Fine. I'll give it, just not to them. The words steadied me. I thought of Grandma's voice saying, "Do what's right, not what's easy." I touched her picture frame and whispered, "I won't let them erase me." My phone buzzed. A message from Brad. "Big plans tonight. Champagne again." I turned the screen face down. I made tea and sat by the window. The moon glowed silver on the street. I wasn't done hurting, but the pain was turning into something sharper. Something useful. Tomorrow I would move. Tomorrow I would start building something that would cut through every lie they had built. And tomorrow the first domino would fall. The next morning the world looked sharper, almost too bright. I took the trust papers to a small law office across town, one my family never used. The lawyer's name was Mr. Hayes. He had kind eyes and a slow voice, the kind that made you lean in. I handed him the file and waited while he read. His eyebrows rose. "You are the only surviving co-signer," he said. "This trust is fully yours." My chest warmed. Hearing it out loud made it real. "I want to build something with it," I said. Quietly. "What kind of something?" "A foundation. Named after my grandmother. For now, it must be anonymous." He nodded. "A silent donor. That can be arranged." I watched him draft the first documents. My fingers tapped the arm of the chair as the idea grew stronger inside me, like a plant pushing through soil. A foundation wasn't revenge yet, but it was the seed of something greater. Something they would never see coming. When I left, I walked past bakery windows and people carrying bags. Everything felt clearer. I could almost feel Grandma beside me, her hand on my arm. She had always said, "The world is bigger than the house you're born into." Maybe she had built this trust so I could step outside the walls my family built around me. On my way home, I stopped by a small store and bought a notebook. I wrote one word inside. Plan. As I closed the cover, my phone buzzed. A message from Marjorie. Family dinner Friday. Mandatory. I sat on a bench and smiled faintly. They thought they were tightening their grip. They didn't know I had already slipped through their fingers. Friday came with cold air and heavy clouds. I walked into the family dinner with a calm smile. The table was long and glittering with dishes, like a stage set for people who loved pretending. Marjorie fussed over the candles. Brad bragged about the lake house again. I sat between two cousins who barely looked my way. Halfway through the meal, Marjorie cleared her throat. We should talk about everyone's responsibilities now that we're managing the estate. She glanced at me with a tiny smirk, like a queen addressing a servant. I folded my hands and waited. I hope you're finding your simple little apartment comfortable, Lena, she added. It's home, I answered. Her smile twitched. Then I dropped the stone in the pond. I met with an attorney this week. The table froze. Forks stopped. Napkins paused in midair. For what? Brad asked too fast. Just planning my future, I said lightly. You know, long-term things. Marjorie's eyes narrowed. What kind of planning? Financial planning. Document planning. Legacy planning. Silence stretched thin. Their faces tightened. They thought I knew more than I did. They thought I had something. That fear tasted sweet. After dinner, I stepped outside and breathed in the night air. My phone buzzed. It was Mr. Hayes. Foundation paperwork drafted. Ready when you are. I leaned on the railing and whispered, "Thank you, Grandma." Somewhere inside me, a spark flared again. The first steps had been taken. Quiet ones but sharp. As I walked to my car, I saw Marjorie watching through the window, her smile stiff. She knew something had shifted. She just didn't know how much. The next morning I took a bus to the cemetery. The sky was soft gray, the kind Grandma liked because she said it made colors richer. I walked between rows of stones until I reached hers. The grass was still new. The flowers my cousins placed had already wilted. I knelt and placed a fresh rose at the base. "I'm trying to stay strong," I whispered. "But the hurt is heavy." The wind moved gently like someone brushing my shoulder. Closed my eyes. "I know you wanted fairness. I know you tried to change the will." My voice shook. "I won't let them twist your memory or your kindness." I placed the rose between my palms and thought of all the mornings I'd helped her dress, all the afternoons I'd made soup and listened to her stories. She had trusted me with her fears, her laughter, her hopes. That trust was worth more than the estate. "You said I'd know what to do when they showed their true faces." I looked at the ground. "Grandma, they showed them. And now I see who they really are." A small ribbon tied to a nearby branch fluttered forward. The word printed on it was justice. My breath caught. I didn't believe in signs, not really, but this felt like one. I touched the stone gently. "I'll fight clean. I won't turn bitter. But I will not let them win." The wind lifted the ribbon again, and I stood. My heart felt steadier, as if her hand rested there, pressing strength into me. I left the cemetery knowing the next step would change everything. Monday morning, Mr. Hayes called. "Your grandmother's amendment shows clear intent," he said. "If we can prove coercion, we can challenge the entire will." I sat up straight. "We can." "Yes," he said simply. Felt my pulse race. "Then let's get proof." He told me we needed testimony, medical records, and anything that showed Grandma was pressured or manipulated. "Especially during the months your aunt visited more often," he added. I thought instantly of the nurse. I texted her, and she agreed to meet again, this time ready to sign a full statement. When we met, her hands still trembled, but her voice was stronger. "She was not herself," the nurse said. "Your aunt kept telling me, 'Leave us for privacy.' But I knew it was wrong." She signed the affidavit with slow, careful strokes. I held the paper afterward, feeling the truth settle into my hands. Later that afternoon I got a message from Brad. "Big meeting Wednesday. Family business stuff. Be there." I stared at it, confused. Then I remembered the family company. It had passed to the heirs. They saw it as theirs now. But I owned a tiny slice through the hidden trust, a piece they didn't realize existed. A small plan took shape in my mind. A simple move, quiet but sharp. That night I researched the company's rules. Even a small percentage granted access to board meetings. They wouldn't expect me to show up. They wouldn't expect me to have authority. I closed my laptop slowly. The match had been lit. The boardroom was all polished wood and tall windows. My cousins laughed near the coffee machine. My uncle stood at the head of the table, chest puffed out like he owned the building. I walked in quietly. When they saw me, their smiles faltered. "You don't need to be here," Marjorie said sharply. "I'm a shareholder," I replied calmly. "I have every right." The room went still. My uncle's brows knit together. "How?" "The trust," I said simply. "Grandma set it up." Their eyes darted to one another, panic slipping like cracks through paint. The meeting began. I sat near the middle, silent but alert. They discussed budgets and plans. My uncle made jokes about new equipment the company could finally afford now that old ties were cut. My jaw tightened. At the end, they voted on positions. I didn't want a role. I just wanted presence. Proof that I wasn't gone. Proof that they hadn't erased me. When the meeting closed, I stepped toward the exit. Brad blocked me. "Where did you get those shares?" "Grandma," I said. "The woman you all forgot to thank." He sneered. "You think this makes you powerful?" "No," I said. "But it makes me visible." As I walked down the hallway, my phone buzzed. The estate auction list had been released. Grandma's things, her locket, her journals, were up for bidding. My heart squeezed. Then I remembered the trust. I had enough to buy back what mattered. And maybe something more. I arrived at the nurse's small apartment after sunset. The lights were warm inside, and the place smelled of tea. She sat on her sofa with her hands folded tight. When I walked in, she nodded once, like she had already chosen her path. "I'm ready to tell everything," she said. Her voice shook, but it held courage too. She brought out a folder with notes she had kept during Grandma's last weeks. "I didn't write everything down," she whispered. "But I wrote enough." She showed me days when Grandma was heavily medicated, times when Marjorie arrived with papers, and moments where Grandma said she felt confused. Each note felt like a stone placed neatly in a row, building a trail of truth. Then she opened her phone and played the recording again. Marjorie's voice pushed through like a cold blade. "Mother, don't argue. A sign. You're tired." My hands clenched. The nurse touched my arm gently. "She didn't understand what she was signing anymore," she said. "And your aunt knew." I asked her if she would speak officially to my lawyer. She nodded and signed the statement on fresh legal paper I brought. Her hand was steady now, as if the act itself gave her back something she had lost. When I left, I stood in the hallway for a moment. My heart felt heavy and full at the same time. The truth was no longer a guess or a whisper. I held it in my bag, solid and real. As I walked down the stairs, I knew this proof was the turning point. And my family had no idea it was coming. The next morning, I walked into the family company building with a small stack of papers in my bag, and a stronger spine than I'd had in months. The reception area buzzed with voices, but when they saw me, whispers swept through like wine through leaves. None of them expected me to show up again. The boardroom door stood open and I stepped inside. My uncle sat at the head of the table with a smug grin. Brad lounged in a chair tapping his pen. When they noticed me, their faces shifted. "You again," Brad muttered. "I'm a shareholder," I said calmly. "I'm here for updates." My uncle scoffed. "Your shares are tiny. Barely more than dust." "Dust still glitters," I replied softly. The meeting began. They talked about profits, new clients, and plans to expand. I watched everything. Every number. Every smug smile. At one point, Marjorie said, "This company is in the right hands now that the will is settled." Something inside me burned, but I stayed quiet. When the meeting ended, I walked toward the exit. On the table near the door sat a booklet about the upcoming estate auction. I picked it up and flipped through pages of items from Grandma's home. Dishes, quilts, furniture. Then my breath caught. Her antique locket. I remembered her wearing it every Sunday. Inside was a small photo of her and my mother. I swallowed hard. I wasn't going to let strangers take that piece of her. I left the building with the booklet pressed against my chest. Had money now. Quiet money. Enough to buy back memories, and maybe find something hidden in them too. The auction hall smelled like old wood and polished floors. People in fancy clothes walked around whispering numbers and pointing at items. I kept my coat pulled tight, trying to stay invisible. My heart thumped when I reached the glass case that held Grandma's locket. The gold was worn in places, soft from years of touch. A small tag read, Lot 47. I stared at it, remembering how she used to press it when she was thinking. I had never seen inside it, not fully. She always kept it close. When the auctioneer called Lot 47, I lifted my paddle with a steady hand. A man in a gray suit raised his too. I felt a jolt of fear, but I raised mine again higher. The man frowned and backed off. The auctioneer's hammer fell with a sharp clap. Sold. Relief washed over me. I took the locket home and sat at my small kitchen table. With slow fingers I clicked it open. The hinge creaked softly. Inside was the tiny photo I remembered. But behind it, pressed into a hidden slot, was something I had never seen. A small USB drive wrapped in a thin cloth. My heart jumped. I plugged it into my laptop. A single video file appeared. My hands shook as I clicked play. Grandma's face filled the screen. Her voice was soft but steady. If my family ever turns on Lena, she said, she deserves it all. Tears blurred the screen. The video ended, but something inside me started. This was no longer just a fight for fairness. It was a promise she left for me to carry out. I watched the video 3 more times before my hands stopped shaking. Grandma had recorded it months before she grew sick. Her eyes were clear. Her voice was strong. She spoke of my kindness, my visits, my loyalty. Then she looked straight into the camera and said, "If they ever try to take what belongs to her, let this speak for me." I sat back stunned. This wasn't just evidence. It was her voice alive again. A message she knew I'd need. I uploaded the video to a secure server and backed it up 3 different ways. If anything happened to the USB, her words would still live. Later that night, I sat at my desk and drafted an email addressed to the family company board and the estate lawyer. The subject line read, "Regarding the true intent of Evelyn Grace Cole." I wrote slowly, telling the truth but holding back the final blow. I wasn't ready to send it. Not yet. Timing mattered. Grandma always said, "Right words, wrong moments still fail." I would wait for the moment when they were the most sure of their victory. When I finished the draft, I saved it in a special folder named Dawn. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. The room was dark except for the streetlights outside. I felt the shift inside me, the quiet click when fear becomes purpose. I whispered, "I'm ready, Grandma." And for the first time since the will reading, I truly was. The next days blurred with preparing, gathering, strengthening. The puzzle pieces were all there. The nurse's affidavit, the unsigned amendment, the trust, and now the video. All I needed was the right spark to bring everything crashing down on the people who had cheated me. Mr. Hayes reviewed every document with the careful eyes of a man who had seen many family battles. "You have enough to open a formal challenge," he said. "But the timing should be strategic." "I know," I answered. "They're planning another family meeting next week. They'll think they're safe." He smiled slightly. "Then that is where you begin." That night I sat on my bed, my notebook open. I listed each step. Secure the evidence. Buy back key items. Prepare to reveal the foundation. Wait for the perfect opening. My pen paused over the final line. The foundation would be the biggest shock. They thought they had taken everything, but they had no idea I held something greater than the estate. I ran my fingers over the locket resting beside me. It felt warm, almost alive. The video inside it would be the voice that broke their lies. I whispered into the quiet room. "They took me out of the will." The words tasted different now. Not weak but sharp. "Fine," I said softly. "I'll write myself back in." And with that, the Betrayal beginning sparked inside me. Steady, bright, unstoppable. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I answered expecting a spam call. Instead, a firm voice said, "Ms. Cole? This is Carla Reeves from the Davenport Herald. Someone leaked documents suggesting fraud inside your family company. I wanted to ask if you'd like to comment." My heart skipped. Fraud. I hadn't leaked anything yet. But someone had. What kind of documents? Yes. Financial reports, meeting notes, missing funds, suspicious transfers, she said. All tied to your uncle and cousin Brad. The source claims internal misconduct. Closed my eyes. This wasn't my doing, but it was a gift. A storm in their house before mine even hit. I can't comment yet, I said carefully. But someone should look into it. After the call, I sat down slowly. Papers covered my coffee table. The trust, the affidavit, the video, and now a reporter calling about fraud. It felt like the universe itself was nudging me forward. Minutes later, my family group chat exploded. "Marjorie, someone is leaking company files. Who did this?" "Brad. Everything is blowing up. Investors are calling. Uncle Drew, everyone keep quiet. We handle this inside." Me. Maybe Grandma's ghost is tired of being quiet. I smirked as I typed it. More messages flashed, panic growing like a fire in dry grass. They were frantic, angry, afraid. And they had no idea their real nightmare hadn't even started. Not yet. I closed the chat and whispered, "Grandma, this is the beginning, isn't it?" And in my chest something answered yes. The panic didn't stay in their phones. Spilled into real life by morning. I got messages from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone wanted to know what I knew. Everyone feared someone was out to expose them. I walked into the grocery store and saw Brad near the frozen aisle, pacing like he'd lost his mind. His phone was pressed to his ear. "I don't know who leaked it," he shouted. "Stop asking me that." I hid behind a display of oranges and watched him. His perfect hair was messy. His shirt was wrinkled. Funny how guilt changed a person's whole shape. When he turned and spotted me, he froze. His eyes narrowed. "Did you do this?" he barked. "Do what?" I asked softly. "You know." His voice cracked. People stared. He lowered it. "You're behind this." "I know you are." I leaned closer. "Brad, you cut me out of the will. You laughed in my face. Why would I lift one finger to save you now?" His jaw tightened. "You'll regret this, Lena." I shook my head. "No. But you might." I walked away before he could respond. That afternoon the chat exploded again. "Marjorie. Drew says we need to call an emergency estate meeting. Tomorrow. Mandatory. Brad. We need to figure out every document Grandma touched." Me, why? "Afraid of what you'll find." They didn't reply. The fear in their silence tasted sweeter than any victory I'd imagined so far. And I wasn't even done. Not even close. The lawyer's office felt tense the next morning. Everyone sat around the long wooden table, the same table where they cut me out. Now their faces were stiff with fear, not joy. For a moment, I stood at the doorway and watched them squirm. Then I stepped inside. The estate lawyer, Mr. Bradford, cleared his throat. "I've called this meeting because new information has come to my attention regarding an amendment to Evelyn Grace Cole's will." Every head snapped up. Marjorie leaned forward. "What amendment?" "There isn't one." Brad nodded quickly. "Yes, the will was final." Mr. Bradford held up a sealed folder. An amendment was located in Mrs. Cole's private records. Signed in her handwriting. I kept my face still, though inside my chest everything pounded. Marjorie shot to her feet. "That's impossible. Show it." "We will," he said calmly. "After validation. The name of the beneficiary is currently blurred until confirmed." Brad swallowed hard. Who could she have added? Mr. Bradford rested his hand on the folder. Someone she trusted deeply, according to her notes. Whispers broke out. Angry, sharp whispers. My uncle's face turned red. "We demand to know who this person is." You can demand, the lawyer said. But the law requires proper authentication first. I folded my arms. Sounds fair, I murmured. Every eye swung toward me. Suspicion, fear, realization creeping like cold water. They knew something was coming. They just didn't know how close it was. Or how unstoppable. The room felt like a storm trapped in glass. My aunt's hands shook. Brad paced. My uncle muttered about dangers and liars. I sat still, watching them like a quiet observer at a play I'd already memorized. Mr. Bradford read from his papers. Handwriting analysis confirms the amendment is authentic. Your mother, Mrs. Cole, wrote it. Marjorie slammed her palm down. She was ill. Anyone could have tricked her. Mr. Bradford raised a brow. You were the one with her at the time, correct? Her mouth fell open. Words stuck in her throat. He continued. The amended beneficiary was added under the clause, to the one who kept faith when others did not. My chest tightened at those words. Grandma's voice echoed in them. Brad groaned. Who is it? Just say it. Identity will be revealed in the next meeting, Mr. Bradford said. We must follow procedure. The word procedure made them all sag with frustration. Then he added, but I can say this. It is not a family member listed in the original will. Silence fell like a hammer. My aunt's face crumpled. Not family. My uncle cursed under his breath. Brad looked ready to punch something. I stood slowly, gathering my bag. Well, I said softly. Looks like things are changing. All eyes burned into me. As I reached the door, Marjorie hissed. Lena, if this is your doing. I turned my head slightly. If I wanted revenge, Aunt Marjorie. Do you really think you'd still be sitting here? Their fear wrapped the room like smoke. And walking away felt better than breathing. The next meeting came 2 days later. Rain tapped the windows of the law office. Soft but steady. I arrived 10 minutes late on purpose. When I stepped into the room, every head whipped toward me like I was the final missing piece of a puzzle. Mr. Bradford cleared his throat. Now that everyone is present, we can reveal the new beneficiary from the verified amendment. Marjorie gripped the table, knuckles pale. Brad leaned forward, sweat shining on his forehead. I sat down, folding my hands calmly. Mr. Bradford opened the folder. Per Amendment 3B, he said, the beneficiary added to the estate is the Evelyn Grace Foundation. Gasps shot around the table. Brad blinked. What foundation? That doesn't exist. Oh, I said softly. It does. All eyes turned to me. Mr. Bradford nodded. It is a newly established charitable foundation named after your grandmother. Created by Lena Cole. Marjorie's mouth fell open. You stole our inheritance and hid it under a charity. I leaned forward. My voice was quiet but sharp. I didn't steal anything. Grandma left a message saying I deserved everything if the family ever turned on me. I placed the USB on the table. And she recorded it. Silence. Fear. My aunt sagged into her chair. My uncle whispered, "Oh God." Brad looked like he might faint. Inside me, something long buried finally rose. Strength, bright and steady. The revenge had begun. And this time they would lose everything they tried to steal. The room felt frozen after my words. My family stared at the USB like it was a bomb waiting to explode. Mr. Bradford plugged it into his laptop. Grandma's video filled the screen again. Her clear voice, her honest eyes, her message meant for me. When she said, "If my family ever turns on Lena, she deserves it all," Marjorie made a weak sound like a balloon losing air. Brad covered his face with both hands. My uncle sank back in his chair as if someone had taken the ground from under him. Then I placed the nurse's signed affidavit on the table. "She witnessed everything," I said softly. "Every time you pressured Grandma. Every time you made her sign papers she didn't understand." "No," Marjorie whispered. "No, that nurse is lying. She kept records," I said. "And they match the dates you visited." Silence tightened the air. Next, I laid down the unsigned amendment. Grandma tried to leave me half the estate. Someone stopped her. Mr. Bradford looked grim. This evidence is strong. Very strong. Brad jumped to his feet. This is a setup. She forged this. She planned this. I held his gaze. Brad, I didn't forge your greed. He sat slowly, shaking. When the meeting ended, no one rushed for the door. They just sat there, small and broken. I walked out with my head high, their stunned faces burning in my memory. For the first time since the will reading, I felt taller. I wasn't powerless. They were. The next step would push them over the edge. And they sensed it. The following morning, I met with Mr. Hayes in his quiet office. The rain from last night still clung to the windows. My hands rested on my lap, steady now. He looked through the evidence again, nodding with the calm of someone who had seen families tear themselves apart, but knew truth when he held it. Are you ready to file? He asked. I took a slow breath. Yes. He typed quickly, filling out pages of forms. When he slid the stack toward me, I picked up the pen and signed my name. My signature didn't shake this time. The challenge was official. We filed for invalidation of the will, misuse of power and coercion. The court will freeze their accounts, Mr. Hayes said. Standard procedure until the case is reviewed. He nodded. Let them feel what they tried to make me feel. We walked the documents to the clerk's office together. The clerk stamped each page loudly, each thump like a drumbeat in a victory march. Outside my phone buzzed. Marjorie. Why are my accounts frozen? Brad. Lena, what did you do? Uncle Drew, fix this. Well, I didn't respond. Instead, I walked to a coffee shop and ordered a drink. While I waited, I watched the rain start again. Drops slid down the window like tiny trails of justice finally falling in place. A small part of me felt sad. But the larger part felt something cleaner, something strong. I whispered, "This is for you, Grandma." And for the first time I felt like she could hear me. By afternoon, the whole town seemed to buzz. People whispered in the bakery, the post office, the grocery store. The story was spreading fast. Faster than I expected. I didn't need to guess why. The headlines answered for me. Heiress cut out of will fights back. Court freezes family estate. Mystery foundation named as beneficiary. New video suggests wrongdoing in Cole family. I stared at the screen, stunned. I had expected noise, but not this loud. My phone started ringing nonstop. Unknown numbers. Reporters. Neighbors. Friends. I ignored them all and focused on the articles. Most people sided with Grandma. With me. They wrote comments like, "She cared for her grandmother. She deserves fairness. Family greed is real. Good for her for standing up. This Lena girl is brave." For the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible. Later I went to the grocery store for bread. An older woman touched my arm gently. "I watched your grandmother grow old," she said. "She spoke of you with love. You're doing right." Her words made my eyes burn. Across town though, the storm hit my family hard. Brad lost 2 clients in one afternoon. My aunt's social group removed her from their committee, pending investigation. My uncle got calls from investors demanding answers. Everything they'd built on lies was cracking. And I hadn't even revealed the biggest piece yet, the foundation's true purpose. Justice wasn't coming. It had already arrived. The courtroom smelled like old books and polished floors. Sunlight came through tall windows, making everything feel both heavy and clear. I sat at the table with Mr. Hayes while my family filled the seats across the aisle. Marjorie looked pale. Brad seemed smaller, like someone had squeezed all the air out of him. My uncle avoided my eyes. The judge entered and everyone stood. The hearing began with statements. Mr. Hayes presented the amendment, the nurse's affidavit, and the video. The judge watched carefully, her face unreadable. I kept my hands folded tightly, breathing slow. Then the nurse entered. She walked to the stand with trembling steps, but her voice was firm when she spoke. She told the truth. every moment she had witnessed. She described Grandma's confusion. She explained the pressure. She repeated Marjorie's words. "Just sign, Mother. It's for the family." Marjorie buried her face in her hands. Brad glared at the floor. My uncle looked like he aged 10 years in 1 hour. When it was my turn, I spoke simply, about caring for Grandma, about the key, about finding the amendment. My voice cracked only once when I said, "She trusted me." After the testimonies, the judge asked both sides if they had final words. Marjorie tried to speak, but her voice broke. Brad didn't speak at all. The judge looked at me, then at them. She said she would review everything and deliver her decision soon. As I left the courtroom, Grandma's words echoed inside me. Some things grow slow but steady. So did justice. The decision came 3 days later. I sat in the courtroom again, hands clasped, heart pounding. My family sat across the aisle, stiff and silent. The judge walked in carrying a folder thick with papers. She spoke clearly, each word landing like a soft hammer. After reviewing the evidence, the unsigned amendment, the video recording, the medical records, the nurse's sworn testimony, and the timeline of visits, I find that Evelyn Cole's will was interfered with through coercion. Marjorie gasped. Brad cursed under his breath. My uncle shut his eyes. The judge continued. The amendment, though unsigned, shows clear intent. Therefore, half of the estate is to be transferred immediately to the Evelyn Grace Foundation, established by Miss Lena Cole. My breath caught. I felt the world shift under my feet, not falling, lifting. She wasn't done. All accounts tied to the estate will remain frozen until full redistribution is complete. The foundation will receive oversight rights and authority to manage its share. Brad slammed his hand on the table. This is insane. The judge frowned. One more outburst, and you'll be escorted out. He sank down, shaking. I stood slowly. My legs felt weak but steady. The judge looked at me and said, Miss Cole, justice has been restored. Tears blurred my vision. Not from sadness. From truth finally settling where it belonged. Outside, the sky was bright and blue, the kind Grandma loved. I whispered, we won. And this time the victory felt clean. The foundation paperwork was finalized 2 weeks after the verdict. I stood in the new office, once a tiny storage room I rented with trust funds, and looked at the sign on the wall, the Evelyn Grace Foundation. Seeing Grandma's name there made my chest feel full, like a place inside me finally healed. I met with Mr. Hayes and the foundation board. We shaped the mission with care. Scholarships for young women. Help for nursing students. Legal aid for girls who had no voice. Every line we wrote felt like a thread pulling me closer to Grandma. She had always said, help those who help others. Now her words would live on. I announced the foundation publicly after everything settled. Reporters asked why I chose this path. Because my grandmother believed in giving, I said. And because kindness must leave a mark. They printed the quote the next day. When I visited the local college to set up the first scholarship, a nursing student hugged me with tears in her eyes. This will change lives, she whispered. I smiled and thought, Grandma, you're changing lives still. Meanwhile, my aunt and cousins struggled to keep up. Their accounts were still frozen. Their plans were falling apart. Their smiles had disappeared from social events. People looked at them differently now. Not with admiration, but with careful distance. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. My revenge wasn't destroying them. My revenge was building something they never could. A legacy built on love, not greed. And the best part, Grandma would have been proud. A month later, I received a letter about the leftover estate items Marjorie had sold before the court froze everything. Many were everyday things, but among them were heirlooms, pieces of family history she sold like yard sale junk. My stomach twisted reading the list. I decided to act. With foundation funds set aside for heritage preservation, I quietly bought back each heirloom at secondary auctions. A quilt Grandma stitched by hand. Her wedding bracelet. a silver spoon set passed down from her great-grandmother. And finally, the photo albums Marjorie had thrown in a box as if they were nothing. Each piece felt like bringing her home. But I didn't stop there. I contacted the historical museum downtown. The director listened as I explained that my grandmother had lived a life worth remembering. She had been a teacher, a caregiver, a steady hand in the community. I offered to donate the heirlooms as a permanent exhibit, the life and legacy of Evelyn Grace Cole. The director cried. When the exhibit opened, I stood in front of Grandma's locket, safe in its glass case now. People walked by, reading her story, admiring her things. Her name, once hidden under my family's lies, shined brighter than ever. My aunt tried to enter the exhibit on opening day. Cameras caught her standing outside, staring at the sign with a tight jaw. Commenters online said, "She sold those pieces. She doesn't deserve to touch them now." Lena honored her grandmother. The family didn't. I didn't go to Marjorie. I didn't need to. The world saw the truth. And Grandma's story belonged to everyone now. Word spread fast. Marjorie Cole, once the queen of every charity board in town, had fallen from grace. People whispered her name like a warning. She tried to keep her chin high, but her eyes told the truth. Fear, regret, and anger all tangled together. The estate freeze hit her the hardest. No access to the mansion upkeep fund. No credit for fancy dinners. No money for her endless list of necessary luxuries. Her friends stopped calling. Invites dried up. Even the country club, a place she treated like a throne room, sent her a polite letter saying her membership was under review. Then came the debt notices. She had spent more than she ever admitted. Bills stacked. With her accounts locked, she couldn't pay. She tried to sell jewelry, but several pieces had been part of the coercion investigation, so the court flagged them. She grew desperate. One morning, news spread that she had quietly put her mansion up for sale. Reporters caught her leaving the property, muttering, "She destroyed us. All of us." Her voice cracked. The video went viral within hours. People commented, "No, your greed destroyed you. She should apologize instead of blaming others. She got what she deserved." I watched the clip only once. I didn't feel joy. Felt closure. She had chosen her path the day she cut my name from the will. Now she walked the road she built. Grandma used to say, "Truth doesn't need to shout." Now truth echoed everywhere Marjorie went. And I didn't have to say a word. Brad's downfall was quieter at first, then sudden, like a tree cracking before it falls. After the fraud rumors hit the papers, his clients grew nervous. Some left gently, some left loudly, all left fast. His flashy smile couldn't save him anymore. But the hardest blow came from something he didn't see coming. Me. Years ago, Grandma had invested a small amount of seed money into one of Brad's projects. The records showed she had transferred the stake into my trust when I turned 18. I didn't know it until I dug deep into old files earlier that month. That meant I had a silent share in his company. A small one, but enough. Enough to pull my investment legally. And enough to trigger a contract clause that forced him to buy out my share immediately. With frozen accounts, Brad had no money to buy anything. His business collapsed within days. He tried to call me 10 times. I didn't answer. His last message said, "You ruined everything." I stared at the text for a long moment. Then I typed back one sentence. "I didn't ruin anything. I stopped you from ruining me." That night, I heard from a friend that Brad had moved into a small apartment outside town. No more sports cars. No more bragging. No more glossy parties. He had built his world on stolen ground, and when the truth pulled it out from under him, everything fell. I didn't laugh. I didn't celebrate. I simply breathed easier. Some justice is loud. Some justice is quiet. Mine was both. On a cool morning in late fall, I drove to the cemetery with a locket in my coat pocket. Leaves brushed across the grass like small whispers. The sky was soft blue, the same shade Grandma used to paint her kitchen. I walked slowly to her grave. The stone looked peaceful, not cold. I knelt beside it and placed the locket gently at the base. My fingers lingered on the metal, warm from my hand. "Grandma," I whispered, "it's done." Wind moved through the trees above me, soft but certain. "I fought for your name," I said. "I fought for your truth. And I won, not with anger, but with the strength you taught me." My throat tightened, but the tears that came were light, not heavy. They fell like little drops of release, not pain. "They cut me out," I continued. "They tried to erase me. But you gave me the key, and the courage to use it." I smiled, a real smile this time. Not a forced one. Not a tired one. Smile full of peace. "You gave me everything I needed." I stayed there for a long time, listening to the quiet. When I finally stood, I felt lighter, as if placing the locket there had closed a door gently instead of slamming it. The world looked softer as I walked back to my car. Revenge had brought justice. Justice had brought peace. Now it was time to step into the life she wanted for me. The invitation arrived in a thick white envelope with gold lettering. At first I didn't realize what it meant. "You are invited to speak at the Hope and Justice TV Forum." It read. National show. A chance to talk about the foundation. Chance to talk about Grandma. Accepted. The studio lights were bright but warm. The host, a woman with kind eyes and a steady voice, welcomed me like an old friend. "Lena Cole," she said to the camera. "The young woman who turned betrayal into something powerful." I felt my cheeks warm. Not from fear, from pride. She asked about the court case, the inheritance, the family lies. I told the truth in simple words, the way Grandma always spoke. "Was revenge your goal?" she asked gently. I smiled a little. Justice. Revenge was just a bonus. The audience laughed softly but kindly. The host leaned closer. "And what do you hope your story teaches?" "That love is stronger than greed," I said. "And that doing the right thing may hurt at first, but it becomes a light you can follow." When the show ended, people lined up to shake my hand. Some shared stories of their own hurt. Some thanked me. One young girl whispered, "I want to start a foundation someday too." I left the studio feeling taller, stronger, surer. This wasn't the end of a fight. It was the beginning of something bigger. Grandma's voice echoed softly in my mind. "Let your heart lead the way." And for the first time I felt like I truly was. The first annual foundation gala took months to plan, but when the night finally came, the hall glowed like a dream. Soft lights hung from the ceiling. Tables shimmered with white cloth. The stage backdrop read in gold letters. "Inheritance isn't money, it's values." I walked through the room greeting donors, volunteers, and students who had already received scholarships. One nursing student told me, "Your grandmother changed my life." The words made my heart swell. She had changed mine too, just differently. When the program began, I stepped onto the stage. The applause washed over me like warm rain. For a moment, I closed my eyes and pictured Grandma sitting in the front row, smiling with her hands clasped. "This foundation," I said, "was built from love, not from anger. From truth, not from greed. And from a woman who believed that kindness could last longer than money." People nodded. Some wiped their eyes. I told them about Grandma's strength, her courage, her laughter. I told them how she had left clues for me, how she trusted me with pieces of her heart. And now, those pieces were becoming something larger than both of us. After the speech, the room rose in a standing ovation. I held the edge of the podium to steady myself, overwhelmed by the power of the moment. This was the legacy my family tried to steal. But I had rebuilt it, bigger, brighter, stronger. And it belonged to the world now. A week after the gala, the foundation sent formal invitations to my aunt, my uncle, and Brad. Not because I wanted them there, but because Grandma would have wanted me to show grace, not spite. I didn't know if they would come. I didn't expect them to. But they did. They arrived quietly, dressed simply instead of in their usual expensive clothes. They kept their heads low as they signed in. People noticed, whispers drifting through the room like soft wind. When I approached them, they straightened, unsure of how to stand. "Thank you for coming," I said. Marjorie's voice cracked. "We didn't want to cause trouble." "You won't," I said gently. "Just be respectful." Brad looked down at his shoes. My uncle cleared his throat. "You built something good," he said. "Better than any of us did." Their words didn't heal everything, but they opened a small door inside me, not to trust them again, but to let the anger fade. During the program, they sat in the last row, silent, watching the foundation's work unfold. Hearing Grandma's name spoken with honor. Seeing photos of the scholarships, the hospital wing, the students who now had hope because of her. I caught Marjorie wiping her eyes once. Maybe it was regret. Maybe shame. Maybe both. But that moment wasn't for them. It was for Grandma. And for the girl I used to be, the girl they tried to erase. She was gone now. I stood taller. The new hospital wing opened on a sunny spring day. The building stood bright white against the blue sky, clean and hopeful. A long banner stretched across the entrance. The Evelyn Grace Care Wing. Doctors, nurses, patients, and volunteers gathered in front as I stepped forward to cut the ribbon. My hands trembled, not from nerves but from joy. A woman beside me whispered, "This wing will help thousands." The thought made my heart swell. Before the ceremony, I walked inside quietly. The hall smelled like fresh paint and possibility. A plaque hung on the wall near the entrance. I traced the engraved letters with my fingertips. For those forgotten by family, remembered by love. Evelyn Grace Foundation. My eyes warmed. Grandma had always worried about the ones who had no one to care for them. Now her name would watch over every patient who walked through the doors. When the speeches began, people shared stories of how the foundation had helped them. Nurses talked about scholarships. Families talked about support. I listened to every word, feeling the weight of what we had built and the strength of what would come next. When it was my turn, I stepped up and said, "My grandmother believed love should leave footprints. Today we're standing in them." Applause rose gently around me. Outside, the sun felt soft on my face. I knew Grandma would have been proud, not because I won a battle but because I built a future. Her legacy was alive, and so was mine. The night after the hospital opening, the world felt quiet in a way I hadn't felt in years. I sat by my window with a cup of tea, the moon shining through like a soft lamp. Everything inside me felt settled, like dust finally resting on a bookshelf. I thought back to the moment in the lawyer's office when they erased my name. I remembered the shock, the hurt, the sharp pain that felt like being pushed out of my own family. I remembered walking to my car with a shattered heart. And then I remembered the key, the attic, the amendment, the video, the truth. Everything that had broken me had also rebuilt me. Grandma had given me the tools, the clues, the hope. She prepared me for a storm she knew would come. And I walked through it with her beside me, every step. Now the foundation was growing. The scholarships were helping. The hospital wing was healing. The heirlooms were safe. And her voice, her love, lived everywhere. My family stayed quiet now, their power gone, their lies exposed. I didn't hate them. I didn't need to. Life already taught them what they needed to learn. I looked out at the stars and whispered, "They erased my name from the will, so I wrote it into history instead." And somewhere in the quiet night, I felt her smile. If you loved this story, hit subscribe for more powerful revenge stories.